warrior extraordinaire, Angus Keck, is the Chief Operating Officer of Australia-based AgUnity, a global platform that empowers those that lack financial security. AgUnity won the Startup Avalanche competition here back in 2020 and received an investment syndicated by Techsylvania and Risky Business. Angus knows the secrets of cultivating a greener future, and he's ready to sow the seeds of wisdom. Prepared to be inspired and empowered to grow a better world. Let's give him a roaring applause. Just warm up, warm up. Come on, Angus, on stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. When I joined AgUnity, I would often tell my friends and family that asked me how it was going. I'd say, it's great. It's an early stage tech company. We've got this big impact vision. I'm learning a lot, but I don't think we're going to make it. And every few months, it was the same story. I would say, yeah, it's really good. I'm having a lot of fun. But again, I think we're probably going to fail pretty soon. And now, I wasn't secretly thinking that we were going to be a surefire unicorn, and I need my clicker. Thank you. And that I'd be buying bottles of champagne and jars of whiskey for everyone. And that everyone would be like, oh, this Angus guy, he's so humble. No, I genuinely believed with every fiber of my being that we were going to fail. And the context for that is, I'd never been part of a startup before. My background was in consulting and sustainable development. And this idea of joining a team and everyone gets onto this plane where you know you don't have enough fuel to get to your destination, it seemed kind of crazy to me. But I decided to join the team and get on the plane because I knew I wanted to contribute to something meaningful. And I figured if I was going to go down in flames, it may as well be doing something where we had the opportunity to change the lives of hundreds of millions of people living in poverty. Now, this was 6 years ago, and since then, we've built and deployed products to over 75 countries. We work with the largest impact organizations around the world, and we've even managed to raise venture capital. We're not a unicorn yet, so no jars of whiskey, but we do have the potential. And when I think about, how did we defy gravity? What was it that did the trick for us? I think there are three things that have boiled down that you could say are our secret sauce that have kept us going. And that is determination, adaptability, and storytelling. So let's dig into that today. If I was to run a pop quiz and ask everyone in the audience what you think is the most important characteristic that determines the most successful entrepreneurs, what do you think you might say? Would it be, a top graduate from Harvard or Oxford, or potentially a founder with prior exits? Maybe it's just someone who's got a ton of cash. Well, according to Jessica Livingston from Y Combinator, she said that it's actually determination. And quote, when I think about the most important characteristics of the most successful people, it is determination. That is by far the most important. And when they launched Y Combinator, they had this kind of basic idea that they would just give money to all the top graduates from Stanford, MIT, and Harvard, and that it would be successful. But that wasn't true, and that wasn't what happened. What they found was, while these people were super intelligent and had some great ideas, they just weren't that motivated to see them through when things got tough. And it was the founders who were really gritty, the founders who refused to give up, that were seeing the most success. And when you think about this, it's kind of obvious in a way why determination matters, because it is bloody hard to create a successful startup. And there's an American entrepreneur whose name is Ryan Westwood, and he surveyed about 10,000 other entrepreneurs. And one of the questions he asked them was, how long did it take you to reach your first $1 million of annual revenue? And almost 2/3 of respondents, or about 63%, said 11 years or more. Now think about grinding day in, day out at something that you care about for 11 years before you get to your first $1 million of recurring revenue. That's a huge amount of work. And for us in our journey, we've had more times coming close to the edge than I'd like to admit. And we've had to be incredibly determined to get through the really, really tough times and still be here today. And I think the most vivid memory that I have of one of these situations is I was on the outskirts of Brisbane in Australia, and I was enjoying my almond latte. I'm a coffee drinker. And one of our advisors rocked up, and he sits down in a chair across from us, and the first words out of his mouth, not hello, not anything else, he says, it's over, the tap is turned off, you need to start firing people immediately. And I've got to admit, this felt like a punch to the guts. I was in shock. It took me a second to recover, but the situation was, at the time, we had very little money, and our product was still under a lot of development. But we had managed to secure a contract with one client where we were building an IoT-based cold chain tracking platform in use in a pilot with Australia's largest retail chain, which is about a $55 billion annual revenue company. So it's a pretty big deal. And what had happened is this retail chain had said to our client, look, we're not sure that we can guarantee an ongoing contract post-pilot. We probably can, but we're a big retail chain and we don't really care what we tell you. And so the client, in a kind of knee-jerk reaction, pulled the handbrake, and for us, that meant we went flying through the front windscreen. And I realized at the time that we had a choice to make. We could have no one would have faulted us if we just decided to say, well, the money's gone. And we did our best, but let's all go home and we'll try again sometime later. But that wasn't our attitude. We just didn't work like that. And so what we ended up doing is this advisor, and this is a tip just to never have an advisor who works with a client of yours, he was also advising the client. So we fired the advisor, we said no to the client, and we were able to negotiate a transition plan that gave us the runway we needed to go and bring other income into the business. And a few months later, we secured our first contract with an ethical global supply chain company and a couple of other opportunities that really kind of launched us into that next level for our business. We didn't actually have to fire anyone. And you might say, okay, well, great, we know determination's important, but so what? Like, isn't determination just a characteristic? It's like innate, right? You're a determined person or you're not. And it's true that a lot of people who have a lot of success are just in their nature very determined. But it turns out it is actually a skill that you can get better at. And one of the ways that you can get better at this is just simply through positive affirmations. And research has shown that if you talk to yourself in a positive way, so instead of saying, oh, I can't, this roadblock, it's really hard, I feel really bad, I don't know if I can do it, you say to yourself, I'm confident, I believe in myself and I believe that I can overcome these challenges, you are actually more likely to succeed. And for anyone who's really interested in this kind of thinking, using the power of the brain, I strongly encourage you to check out a book called The Alter Ego Effect by a gentleman named Todd Herman. And Todd's worked with Rafa Nadal and Kobe Bryant and a lot of sports superstars, but as well as business people. And the basic premise is that all of us have this ability inside to create an alter ego version of ourselves that has the characteristics that maybe we wish we had. And that might be determination, but it could also be confidence. It could also be being funny. It could also be public speaking. And it's a really fascinating book. And again, would encourage people to check it out. And look, now whether you decide to just create a mantra of saying, I'm going to treat myself well, I'm going to have positive affirmations around being determined, or you decide to create an alter ego, I think the point of the key takeaway is that being determined and giving your startup the biggest chance of success is actually a choice. Okay, so we've talked about determination. So that was one of the three things that kind of helped us get us to where we're at today. I think in regards to the next topic, I often see it quoted that the main reasons that startups claim they fail is that they were unable to raise financing and capital, or they simply ran out of cash too soon. But I don't actually agree that that's the reason they failed. I think that's just a symptom of a much bigger problem. And that problem is an inability to find product market fit in the very limited time you have as a founder between launching your startup and either bootstrapping it or using up the seed capital that you were able to raise. And one of the main reasons that founders struggle with this concept is because they're really resistant to changing their idea in the face of new information. And there's a quote from Mark Andreessen, who's a co-founder of Netscape, and Andreessen Horowitz that has always stuck with me. And he says, the market doesn't care how long you've been building your product. If the market doesn't want it, you're doomed. And for a lot of founders, you spend so much time at the beginning of the journey preaching your idea and convincing people that it's a really good one. You've got to get people to join your team, you've got to get investors to give you money, and you go out tweeting to the world, we're going to change everything by doing this. And we have a saying in Australia, and I really hope this translates, and forgive me if it doesn't, but It's that no one wants to hear their baby is ugly. And for founders, this is often how it can feel with your idea, right? I gave birth to it, I'm raising it, I'm very proud of it, and if any of you were to tell me that it doesn't look good, that would make you a terrible person. Now, don't get me wrong, I think all babies are beautiful, but it just highlights the point that people can be really attached to something that they start out with. And the challenge of this attachment is that it means if, for instance, you're getting information from the market that people don't actually like your product or they're not using it, it's very hard to pivot or adapt your product or business model. You know, for us at AgUnity, we weren't immune to this. It was definitely something we've encountered a couple of times, but I think the biggest pivot that we've had to do was realizing that when we set out on our vision to impact 1 billion farmers and their families around the world, that we shouldn't have started with the farmers. And it's very analogous to what Elon Musk did at Tesla, where their mission, for those who are unaware, is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. Now, you think about that vision statement and you go, okay, well, obviously the best way to do that is to get as many people driving electric vehicles as quickly as possible. But that's not what they did. And they were smarter than us in this regard. What they realized is they spent all their time and money trying to build a mass-produced vehicle at a cost that people could afford. It would take them so long that they would have a much greater risk of failing completely. And so it wasn't, let's build the Model 3. It was, let's build the Roadster. And the reason is, a Roadster is a premium product. You don't have to make as many of them, so from a business, it's less risky. You can also reinvest the premium that you get from selling Roadsters into the R&D of building the Model 3, which is your mass-produced product. But critically, and this was the really big learning for us, is that you are actually able to establish trust in a market with a new technology for a new company in a way that is much less risky. You're not trying to deliver 1 million vehicles in 1 year. You might deliver 10,000. And it's worked. It's, you know, as we all know with Tesla, it's worked really well. And for us, so what that was we realized that we were going into a lot of markets. We were going to farmers saying, we've got a product that can change your lives. But for them, they're like, A, we don't know about this technology, and B, we don't know who you are. And we don't have a lot of money, so why would we take the risk if we may not get the return? And so what that looked like is we now target cooperatives, as well as farmers as well, but we now target cooperatives who are better resourced, they're usually more tech savvy, and they have these networks of millions of farmers who already trust the cooperative because they're working together today. So it's a different way for us to achieve our goals, but it's a much faster way to get there. And the only way we were able to do this was by having some very honest conversations where we looked at some key company metrics and we realized that we weren't growing the way we wanted to grow. So what can you do to be adaptable? Well, look, there's a bunch of different things you can do, and a lot of it's just your attitude. But one idea that I thought might be worth sharing comes from a company called Odeo. And just out of curiosity, does anyone ever heard of Odeo before? I'm going to take that as a no. I can't see everyone, but that's fair enough. I hadn't either until recently, to be honest. So Odeo was a podcast streaming service that was launched in America back in 2005, and they wanted to revolutionize the way podcasts were done. And they raised about $5 million, and a year later, Apple released iTunes, and it just changed everything and effectively completely removed them from the market. What they did, instead of going, well, you know, what are we going to do? We've got a product and no market, and we're going to have to wrap up shop. They said, let's have an internal hackathon, and let's see if there's any other ideas or features or products that we haven't thought about developing that we can develop. And it just so happened that one of the three members was a young engineer named Jack Dorsey, and he'd been working on a short messaging solution that he said, hey, I think this could be pretty popular. And that today is what we now know as Twitter. So I guess my advice to some startups is, you know, hold regular hackathons internally with your team. And the two benefits you'll get from this is, one is you probably get exposure to ideas or features that you've maybe not taken seriously before, but you'll also tell your team and yourself that being open to change, being adaptable is not just okay, it's actually a positive thing, and that is a much, much better position to be in for your company. Okay. So the final piece I wanted to share today is around storytelling. And unlike determination, which is something that you'll need for long-term success, or adaptability, which is something you'll need in the short to medium term, storytelling is something that all entrepreneurs need from day one. And the reason is, if you're a startup founder, it's really hard to convince people that your idea is any good. A lot of people just stare at you and go, so what? You know, why should I care? And what stories do is they help founders transmit knowledge, passion, and purpose in a more meaningful and memorable way. And today, almost all of the world's biggest companies use storytelling as a leadership tool just because they know that if their leaders are really good storytellers, their bottom line will do exponentially better than if no one bothered telling any stories at all. And let's take a very simple example. If I was to tell you all, we sell phones to farmers. It helps them communicate and transact better, and we earn money on subscription and transaction fees. What would you say? You know, okay, sure, you know what I do. It's not that compelling. Or what if I said, this 30 euro AgUnity phone will enable a smallholder farmer to lift herself out of poverty. And we will do for millions of farmers just like her what Alibaba did for manufacturers in China. This very phone will soon be given to a farmer in Kenya or Ghana, and it may just be the most life-changing possession that she ever owns. But it is clearly no ordinary phone. There are millions of good organizations working around the world who are all trying to connect with these last-mile communities, but they struggle to do so effectively. And that's what AgUnity does, connects them to last-mile users with this. Now, which pitch are you going to be more interested in hearing more about? It's the difference between explaining facts and explaining feelings. And just FYI, what I just said then, that was a part of our pitch at Startup Avalanche at Techsylvania in 2020 that we were lucky enough to win. And just in case anyone is wondering what on earth an Australian is doing on stage in Romania when the company doesn't even operate in this country, and their full name, Angus, Keck, all relates to certain food groups of the country. So very grateful to be here in person. But coming back to storytelling, how do you tell a good story? Look, the truth is, there are a lot of better storytellers at Techsylvania than me. And you've probably seen a number of them already, and they're in a much better position to tell you how to tell a good story. And there's all the obvious stuff, like just look at the people who do it really well. There's Simon Sinek on TEDx is a classic, as is Steve Jobs' iPod and iPhone launches. But I think the one thing that we learned that helped us tell our story better was realizing that when it comes to storytelling, it's actually nothing to do with us. It's all about your audience. It's all about the idea that you're sharing and the gift that you're giving them. Because I think what happens is when we think about getting up on stage and talking, we're all worried that someone in the audience is either thinking or you're going to yell out like, get off the stage, loser, you suck. And thank you. And that's, it's kind of missing the point that really the truth is it doesn't matter about us. We're just here to convey a story or a message or an idea. And if you're only talking about things that benefit you or your business, and we all know we've seen those talks, when it's like, hang on, is this just, am I just being sold to? You know, it doesn't really make a lasting impression. But if you can understand your audience, know what matters to them, and if you can remember to put them first when you're talking, it makes all the difference. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try and bring it all together and wrap it up. As entrepreneurs, we face extraordinarily tough challenges and a very high degree chance of failure in creating a successful startup. And every day someone walks into our office or onto Zoom and they pile a whole bunch of new problems on our lap. But you know, along with those problems comes a lot of opportunities. And I think nailing these three things that I've talked about today, so using affirmations to increase your determination, fostering an internal environment where change is considered a positive, and understanding when telling stories that your audience matters, you don't, will help you get there. And when I think about the decision I made 6 years ago to get on a plane that I knew had a very good chance of crashing and burning, I know it's these three things that really helped us stay afloat and have helped us get to the destination we set out to get to. So that's it from me. I wish you all the very best of luck if you're an entrepreneur. And yeah, mulțumesc.
Thank you. Question time. We are open for questions. Anybody? You have to raise your hand if you have one. If not, I'll take it until you warm up. It got me the storytelling. I mean, I'm a storyteller, so I have to ask. What about personal branding?
personal branding.
Yeah.
For
For the founder, what are your recommendations?
Ah,
What do you do?
well, yeah, so it's an interesting tidbit. I'm not technically a founder of AgUnity now. By all intents and purposes, I am, but I actually joined a year after, and I just happened to come along for the ride. But what I've seen our founder and CEO do very well that I don't do as well as him, I mean, he uses LinkedIn like a machine, and I think LinkedIn has become pretty terrible in terms of people reaching out, but if you can get a big audience and you can actually get relevant content out there, what happens, it's not so much that you're going to get too many people contacting at you, but when you then go to someone, potential client or a potential investor, I've had a number of calls where they said, oh, David, I remember that post that you did, and I thought that was really interesting, and then all of a sudden they know who you are. And the difference of walking into a room with investors where they know who you are, and they maybe care, versus walking in and they're like, who are you and why are you wasting my time? It can make literal difference between signing a check or not.
True, thank you. Anybody? I'm gonna follow up then. So, storytelling, social media. A lot of founders and even tech professionals, they're tech professionals. How many founders are in the room? Okay, tech professionals. Okay, so more of you. Tech professionals, they're satisfied usually with just building. You're builders. You're not storytellers. You don't want to storytell, but we live in the age where all the team members are important. We need to get our story there. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a struggle for a lot of technical founders or engineers. You know, it's the last thing that any of them want to do is get up on stage or get on a call, or it's like, leave me alone, I'm trying to build something. But if it's just you, I mean, unless you're a CTO, if you're the founder, you have to be able to tell a story. And it can help to get a 2IC. Like, I'm a 2IC, and I'm here representing our whole business, when the founder, who does a better job than me, but he could be here as well. So that's one option, but I think, you know, the idea I mentioned before about we often think very rigidly about what we can and can't do, and it's complete bullshit. We can kind of do anything we want to, we just have to think in the right way. And that book that I mentioned, The Alter Ego, honestly, I've not really come across anything as profound as that in terms of how it talks about the power of the mind. So if you're really someone who doesn't like storytelling, you can totally do it, you just need to be open to the idea.
Thank you so much, very inspiring. Thank you.